Hello, historians! Today we will be talking about the American Revolution. More specifically, we'll be talking about three specific topics, one of them being George Washington, our first president. We will also be discussing two battles, the Battle of Bunker Hill and the Battle of Yorktown. We will also discuss the thoughts of the British on the American Revolution, more specifically, King George III, and what he thought about the loss of his territories to the colonists. Starting off on our first ever president, George Washington. George Washington was born on his family's plantation in Pope's Creek in Virginia in February 22nd, 1732. He was the first of 6 children, but he had 3 other older siblings from his father's previous marriage. Unfortunately, when George Washington was 11 years old, his father passed away, and his older brothers inherited most of his father's estate, including the place he grew up in, which is now known as Mount Vernon. Though luckily, George Washington did inherit one of his family's smaller estates with 10 enslaved people to work for him. Unfortunately, he was unable to go to university, but he did go with his neighbor, Colonel William Fairfax, to learn about surveying, and his mother helped him learn how to manage his plantation. He would later on go from surveying as a profession to pursuing a military career. He offered his services to Lieutenant Governor Robert Dinwiddie in October of 1753. The Lieutenant Governor was the governor of Virginia. He accepted Washington's offer and sent him to meet with the French in the Ohio Valley, in which he told them to leave. They said no, obviously, and they don't want to give up their land. But that would mean that Dinwiddie would again enlist George Washington's help, which he was promoted to a lieutenant colonel to lead about 160 men to Ohio Valley to fight with the French. Even though they surrendered for necessity, it would mark the start of the French and Indian War. Then on June 15, 1775, the Second Continental Congress chose him to be the commander-in-chief of the Continental Army. He took command in July 3rd, 1775, after the battles of Lexington and Concord and the Battle of Bunker Hill. This marked a very important start of his leadership for American independence, because he would be later known as the father of the country. He became president in 1789 to 1797, where he refused to serve a third term, even though he was very popular among the people. He wrote a farewell address, which warned against political parties and getting involved with foreign wars and foreign countries. He also presided over the Constitutional Convention in 1787, which created the government we know today and writing the U.S. Constitution. We did fight in the Battle of Bunker Hill, which was happening during the siege of Boston, and the first major battle of the Revolutionary War. This happened June 17, 1775, just 2 months after the Battle of Lexington and Concord. More than 15,000 troops from different states came to stop the British troops from going and attacking the American people in Boston. There were about 5,000 or more troops stationed under General Thomas Gage, and unfortunately, the American colonists were defeated in that battle. But while we lost around 450 Americans, we wounded a bunch of more people, including a lot of officers, around 89. The American soldiers were so low on ammunition that General William Prescott said that don't fire until you see the whites of their eyes, which I personally think is crazy by itself. But imagine, you're like this big empire, you're the British, you have conquered like almost the entire world, and then you almost lose a battle. It's like if you're running against some normal kid that you underestimate, and once you hit the finish line, you win, but you had to push yourself even more. you're out of breath, you're breathing, your hands are on your knees, and the kid was right behind you. You could feel him right there. But after that battle, obviously, that we had many more battles against the British. But we will be talking about the last battle, the Battle of Yorktown. It occurred in Yorktown, Virginia, September 28th to October 19th, 1781. And if you're a Hamilton nerd like me, you would know that was when the world turned upside down. Marquis de Lafayette was there, George Washington was there, we also had General Rochambeau. And then in 1783, the Peace Treaty of Paris was signed, which finally concluded the American Revolutionary War. It was signed by representatives of Britain, United States, France, Spain, and it formally recognized the United States as an independent nation. The key negotiators had Ben Franklin, John Adams, John Jay. America finally became America. Cue the eagles and fireworks. Now that our fireworks are done, we can talk about what's last on our list, which is the British thoughts on the American Revolution. Not a lot of people were happy during our, little uprising, but some people like Lord Dunmore even wrote a proclamation, which he issued in 1775, saying that if a enslaved person wanted to join the British forces, that they would be granted freedom so long as they fought against the American colonists. Adding to that is that he was the royal governor of Virginia. Now on to our next person. Like I said, we were talking about King George III. In 1775, which I think was a really popular year to be against the colonists, he declared the colonies would be open rebellion, and he ordered his military to stop it. He refused to negotiate at first, and even after the Battle of Yorktown, he wanted to keep fighting. But Parliament pushed for a stop of the war, and he accepted it. After learning about the loss, he wrote, "America is lost. Must we fall beneath the blow?" Though when he met John Adams in 1785, 2 years after the war, he basically said that even though he was the last to accept his defeat, it's inevitable that the United States would become its own power, and that hopefully that they would meet in friendship. Alrighty, thank you so much for joining me today, historians. We learned a lot. We learned about George Washington. We learned about 2 really important battles. We learned about, George Washington and Britain saying good luck to the United States. Thank you so much for watching.